Okay, well, thank you very much, Jan, for that warm introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I know everyone is really, really busy, and I really, really appreciate your time. Thanks especially to my colleagues, Francesco, Julie Jarowitz, there she is, and Julie DeBrusen is here too somewhere. Where are you, Julie? There she is. Thank you very much for being here. Anna, very, very nice to see you. And Dan, I think, is here also. I was in Oshawa, like, for an event 10 days ago. So so I feel it's almost in my writing. So really, really very glad to have this great group here today. And Jan, I did ride my bike here. And thank you to David, the very nice RCMP officer who rode his bike alongside me. Neither one of us is as young as we once were, so it wasn't that hard for us to keep up with each other. Okay. Alors, tout d'abord, je tiens à souligner que nous sommes réunis sur les territoires traditionnels de nombreuses nations, notamment les Mississauga du Credit, les Anishinaabeg, les Chippewa, les Haudenosaunee, et les Wendat. So, this audience doesn't need me to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, that Canada's economy has made a remarkable recovery from the COVID recession. Last year, Canada delivered the strongest economic growth in the G7. And as we found out on Friday, in the first quarter of this year, our economy grew much more robustly than expected. There are 830,000 more Canadians working today than when COVID first hit. We have recovered 126% of the jobs that were lost in those first dark months, compared to just 114% in the United States. When we announced a Canada-wide system of affordable early learning and childcare in our 2021 budget, we said that it would create new economic opportunities for mothers across Canada, and thus greater prosperity for us all. And you know what? It worked. This February, the labor force participation rate for Canadian women in their prime working years hit a record high of 85.7%. We talked with President Biden about that when he was here. So today, there are more Canadians with good jobs than ever before. And that's really, really important. As we all know, Putin and the pandemic drove up inflation around the world. Central banks have responded with one of the fastest and most synchronized monetary tightening cycles since the 1980s. And now, today, here in Canada, inflation is coming down. Inflation has declined for 8 months in a row, falling to 5.2% in February, and the Bank of Canada predicts that it will drop to just 2.6% by the end of this year. In February, the average wage for Canadians went up by 5.4%. That meant that paychecks outpaced inflation, which meant more money in Canadians' pockets after a hard day's work, from coast to coast to coast. But we all know that our most vulnerable friends and neighbors are still feeling the bite of higher prices, as Jan said. And that's why our budget delivers targeted inflation relief to those who need it most. For 11 million Canadians and Canadian families, including many here in Toronto, a new grocery rebate will provide up to $467 to help make up for the higher prices at the checkout counter, without adding fuel to the fire of inflation. Because we also know that what all Canadians want most right now is for inflation to keep coming down and for interest rates to fall, which is why the budget I tabled last week will ensure that Canada maintains the lowest deficit and the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7. We're reducing government spending by more than $15 billion while taking great care not to reduce the services and direct support that Canadians rely on. Even with a slowing economy, both here in Canada and around the world, our deficit is lower than it was last year, down from 1.5% to 1.4% of GDP. That is the lowest by some margin in the G7, and our deficit will continue to decline. Canada is a country of peace, order, and good government. We have strong institutions and a resilient financial system that is the envy of the world. Our country has a proud tradition of fiscal responsibility, and that is a tradition we are determined to uphold. Canada's strong balance sheet means that we can continue to invest in Canadians and in the Canadian economy for years to come, just as we have done since 2015. Because we know that investments in Canadians are also investments in our economy. This is what the US Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, has referred to as modern supply-side economics. We're investing in housing because our economy is built by people, and people need homes to live in. We're investing in Canadian workers so they have the skills they need and can travel to where the jobs are. We're investing in a stronger immigration system and welcoming record numbers of skilled workers to Canada to support our growing businesses. And we're investing in affordable childcare for families from coast to coast to coast so that more Canadian mothers no longer have to choose between their family and their career. Now, investments in housing and skills and immigration and childcare, these aren't just social policies, they're economic policies too. And healthcare is another one of those policies. C'est pourquoi nous réalisons l'investissement global de 198 milliards de dollars dans les soins de santé publique que le Premier ministre a annoncé en février. Ici, en Ontario, cet investissement supplémentaire signifie 76,8 milliards de dollars de plus dans les soins de santé publique au cours des 10 prochaines années. Ce sont 76,8 milliards de dollars qui aideront à fournir une médecine de famille à tous les habitants de l'Ontario, à offrir un meilleur accès à des services de santé mentale, à éliminer les retards qui ont été accumulés dans les opérations chirurgicales et à veiller à ce que chaque personne dans notre grande province reçoive les soins dont elle a besoin. Nous veillerons à ce que chaque Canadien puisse compter sur un système de santé publique universel de classe mondiale. Un système qui mérite sa place au cœur d'identité canadienne, tout en renforçant le système de santé publique dont nous disposons aujourd'hui. Nous en étendons la portée. Aujourd'hui, le sourire d'une personne permet de déterminer le montant de son salaire ou le revenu de ses parents. Ce n'est pas acceptable. Et c'est pourquoi nous allons changer cela grâce à notre nouveau régime canadien de soins dentaires. Depuis décembre, nos investissements ont aidé plus de 240 000 enfants canadiens à recevoir les soins dentaires dont ils ont besoin. And by the end of 2023, we will begin rolling out a dental care plan that will eventually cover up to 9 million uninsured Canadians. That will mean no Canadian ever again will need to choose between taking care of their teeth and paying the bills at the end of the month. And I have to tell you, since tabling the budget, I have been traveling around the country already. And so many people have come up to me in airports, on airplanes. That's a good place to corner the finance minister, especially if she is sitting in an aisle seat, when I've done events. And so many people have said to me, I'm really glad you're doing dental care. When I was a kid, I really could have used that. Or I have a neighbor who really, really needs it. And I do really believe that it's not right in Canada that you can tell how much money someone makes by their smile, or how much money, even worse, their parents make by their smile. So I'm glad that as a country, it's something that we're putting in place. So these are significant and necessary investments, because a strong and effective healthcare system is essential for a strong and healthy Canadian workforce. And we need a strong and healthy Canadian workforce now more than ever. Because as we wrestle inflation to the ground, Canada must also navigate two fundamental shifts in the global economy. First, in what is the most significant economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution, our friends and partners around the world, chief among them the United States, are investing heavily to build clean economies and the net zero industries of tomorrow. At the same time, Putin and the pandemic have cruelly revealed to the world's democracies the risk of economic reliance on dictatorships. As a result, our allies are moving quickly to friendshore their economies and build their supply chains through economies like our own. Together, these two great shifts represent the most significant opportunity for Canadian workers in the lifetime of anyone here today. And that's not hyperbole or mere turn of phrase. Last month, in her address to our Parliament, President von der Leyen of the European Union said she wants Canada and Europe to join forces for the climate and for our economies, and to end what she called Europe's dangerous dependencies on authoritarian economies. In his address a couple of weeks later, also to our Parliament, President Biden told us that we are at an inflection point in history. He said that we had all learned the hard way that just-in-time supply chains expose us to significant risks, and he urged us to work together to build a future based on our shared prosperity, where Canada and the United States can anchor the most competitive, prosperous, and resilient economic region in the world. These are our closest friends and our steadfast democratic allies. These are our two greatest trading partners. And like so many of our partners around the world, they need the expertise of Canadian workers, the ingenuity of Canadian businesses, and the resources that Canada has in such fortunate abundance. And that's why today, and in the years to come, Canada must either meet this historic moment, this remarkable opportunity, or we will be left behind as the world's democracies build the clean economy of the 21st century. Our government's choice is clear and unequivocal. We will fight for Canadians, and we will fight for Canadian businesses. We will ensure that Canada seizes this historic opportunity. We're going to build a clean electrical grid that connects Canadians from coast to coast to coast, protects our environment, and delivers cleaner, more affordable electricity to Canadians and Canadian businesses. We're going to make Canada the very best place in the world for businesses to invest, because that means more vibrant, prosperous communities and more good careers for Canadians. Canada is the only G7 country with free trade deals with each of our other G7 allies. We're going to make Canada a reliable supplier of clean energy to our allies and to the world. And from critical minerals to electric vehicles, we're going to ensure that Canadian workers mine and process and build and sell the goods and resources that our allies need. We're going to make sure that the unions who built the middle class can continue to thrive, and we're going to make it easier for Canadian workers to learn the skills they need. When the government of Canada buys things from other countries, we're going to make sure that those countries offer Canadian businesses the same access we give their businesses. We're going to build big things here in Canada, from a Volkswagen battery plant in St. Thomas, to the Galaxy lithium mine in Quebec, to the Trans Mountain expansion in Alberta, to the Atlantic Loop, to the LNG terminal in Kitimat, BC. Our plan is about creating good-paying jobs, good careers for everyone, everywhere, from big cities to small towns, from right here in the heart of downtown Toronto, Ontario, to Peace River, Alberta. For our auto workers building electric vehicles and our bus drivers who drive them. For our skilled tradespeople expanding our clean energy grid and building thousands and thousands of affordable, energy-efficient homes. For our miners, our energy workers, our nuclear engineers, powering Canada and the world. For our healthcare workers and our teachers who make our communities thrive. For our farmers and our fishers who feed Canada and the world. For our incredible service workers, and thank you to everyone who has taken care of us and served us this delicious lunch today. A lot of people say to me, "Oh, Minister, you work so hard, you must be so tired, you have such a hard job." But I can tell you, I don't think anyone seated at a table here today will work as hard today as the people who served us our meal or will wash the dishes afterwards. So let's give them a hand. You are essential, and I want you to know that we appreciate and value your work. For our forestry workers, our climate scientists, and our environmental biologists. For Indigenous people building major projects and sharing in the prosperity they create. For our incredible computer scientists here in Toronto, who have been creating more jobs than Silicon Valley and have already made Canada an AI superpower. I have Mars seated right in front of me. We had to give them a hand. And for our new generation of small business entrepreneurs, dreaming up solutions to the challenges of the 21st century, and their hard-working employees, providing for their families all across our great country. As I've traveled across Canada in my pre-budget consultations, getting ready to put this budget together, I have met a lot of incredible, hardworking Canadians. I've met potash miners and childcare workers. I've met scientists and innovators, and the longshore workers and truckers who keep Canada's economy moving. And all across our great country, I've met people who value the same things. A good career that pays them well, doing work they're proud of. The ability to live with dignity, to be who they are, to love who they love, and to be judged on their character, rather than what they look like or where they were born. The belief that if they work hard, they can afford to raise their children and launch them into an even more prosperous future. And the conviction that because they live in Canada, by birth or by choice, every single day represents a new opportunity. And that is what our budget invests in. the possibility for every single Canadian to share in the remarkable opportunities that Canada provides, and in the new era of prosperity that we will build together. The brave people of Ukraine have reminded me, I think they've reminded all of us, that we must never take our freedom and our democracy for granted. We have the power to shape our country's future, and we must always be sure to use it. What a gift it is to call this remarkable country our home. Canada is a land filled with good, hardworking people, people who do big and important things. And it is because of you, because of us, the people of Canada, and the big and important things we will do in the months and years to come, that I have never been more optimistic about the future of our country than I am today. Thank you very much. I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you very much. That was terrific. Thank you for making my board chair happy. You're making my life very easy with that. Shout out to AI and tech.
I didn't know.
Oh, sorry.
I didn't know he'd be sitting at my table when we put those remarks together. So I say it even when you're not in the room.
Very good. And as mentioned, details on the table in terms of how to participate in Q&A or fireside chat. I've got a couple of questions to kick things off, and I see I've got some questions coming in already, so I might not even get through many of these. First, thanks so much, Deputy Prime Minister, for joining us here today. We all appreciate, in fact, I think somebody told me once, you ask 40 million Canadians what they think, you'll get 40 million ideas. So I'm sure a budget is not an easy thing to put together because the amount of work and the amount of diversity of needs across the country. I wanted to start with immigration, which is near and dear to our hearts here in Toronto, just as it is in Montreal. Between the cities of Toronto and Montreal, 45% of all newcomers arrive in our cities, needed for our economies, but very challenging for municipal budgets that just simply cannot accommodate the cost of housing.
Okay, there's a lot of points in there, and I do want to start by saying one core thing about immigration. I think immigration is part of the Canadian secret sauce, which is one of the reasons I'm so optimistic about our country's future. If you look around the world today, I challenge you to name a country which is more enthusiastic about welcoming immigrants than Canada, and which is better at doing it than we are. I don't think there's any country in the world that does it as well as we do. And as finance minister, like as a person, I see it as great. I am a child of multicultural Canada, and I think that's part of what makes our country such a wonderful place to live in. And certainly with my teenage kids growing up in very multicultural Toronto, I think it's such a gift for them as people. But as finance minister, I also really, really see immigration as an incredibly powerful economic driver for Canada, particularly at a time when I would say demographics is one of the downside risk factors weighing on so many other economies. So I want to say that very, very clearly. Because I think it's important for us to recognize what a strength and what a positive it is. Now, I very much agree with you, Jan, that for us to be a country that effectively welcomes immigrants, for us to be a country with a growing population, which we are, we need to build more homes. I think that is one of our principal economic challenges. The 2022 budget was the housing budget, and the centerpiece of it was a $10 billion investment in housing, a multi-year $10 billion investment in housing. That wasn't money that, you know, we deployed on budget day. That was money that we set out as a program of investment. And in fact, earlier in March, the Prime Minister put into action a key part of that program, which is the $4 billion housing accelerator. And there are representatives of Oshawa and the City of Toronto here. So I'm going to make a pitch to you guys about that housing accelerator. I was in BC last week, and I said to the Vancouver Board of Trade and the Surrey Board of Trade, and there were city councillors and mayors there too, what I'm saying to you guys. So the race is on. That $4 billion housing accelerator is money that's on the table for municipalities to pitch for. And what we're saying to municipalities is, you figure out how you can build more homes faster, show us a plan, and you can get some of the money. Now, the mayor of Surrey was at an event I did on Thursday. She told me she's going to be the first one to submit an application. I'm a Toronto MP, though, so I'm challenging you guys, get in there too. And I'm sort of teasing, but I mean it also very seriously. I think with housing, the central issue is to get more homes built faster. We have lots of people from the financial sector here today. I think you guys are going to nod when I say there is capital available to build homes. Yes, table of bankers are nodding. Yeah, the capital is there. What we really need, though, is the permission to get those homes built, and we need to do it faster. So the federal government is a very enthusiastic partner in this effort, and I think we're going to have a real Team Canada effort with municipalities, provinces, and territories, and the federal government working together to get it done.
Okay, fair enough. And I know Mike York and our mayor back there will take that challenge up. Make sure we've got enough trades, and let's see what we can do.
I think Anna was nodding her head too. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely she was, and she knows a lot about housing in the city as well. My next question was going to be about one of the centerpieces of the budget, which was the climate economy focus. But I've got two aligned questions from the audience, so I'm just going to go to those directly. The Toronto region now contributes 23% to Canadian GDP, 40% of the innovation economy. Focus and investment here is imperative to the region, to Canada, and to the policy goals you have outlined. How will the budget ensure livability and inspire multi-generational growth in this critical region? Canada's future hangs in the balance. So it's somewhat related to the innovation economy and somewhat related to the challenges of the large population base that we have across the region.
Okay, well, I could talk about that for hours, and I am a politician, so that's not actually a joke. It's sort of a threat. But I'll contain myself. And let me just say, I'll say three things there. The first is I do really want to emphasize the importance that our government places on cities. I really think that we need to think of cities as an economic engine, of cities themselves as a sector and a driver of growth. And that is definitely the approach that our government has taken since 2015 and that we're going to continue to take. So that would be point one. Point two, the multi-generational point in there. I think that is a very important point. And one of the issues, you know, my first answer on housing was about housing and immigration, and I think there's an important connection there. But there is also the connection between housing and young Canadians. And I really believe that we need to focus very, very much on our young people. We need to focus on helping them get an education and helping make that affordable. And one element in the budget was increasing the Canada Student Grant by 40% and increasing by 50% the loans that students can get. So students can now get more than $14,000 a year in grants and loans. And of course, we've eliminated the federal interest from loans. That's relevant to your question, Jan, because one way that we make the GTA a great place for generations to continue to live together is to support our students and our young people. The other thing that I think we have to do is keep on working hard to make it affordable for young people to buy a home. And those housing investments we were talking about with respect to immigrants apply very much to young Canadians. Again, I'm going to take advantage ruthlessly of the fact we have the Canadian Bankers Association here. We're looking forward to the launch of the tax-free first-time home buyers savings account. I think that's something that will make a big difference for young people saving to buy their first home. And on the multi-generational point, we put forward last year the multi-generational home renovation tax credit. And I think that's another important element to do precisely what your questioner asked, which is how do we let the generations stay together?
Yeah. And I would just follow that by saying housing is such a critically important piece, and affordability of education important. In the context of the Toronto-Waterloo corridor, it's 34 municipalities, and how do we get a regional plan for mobility of people, mobility of goods, as well as housing affordability. It's a number of ingredients that need to be brought to the table, and I think the Pearson Zone that we're focused on as a key project is a very good example of that. There's insufficient public transit going in there. The workers' salaries are such that they have to drive hours to get in, and they can't afford the private vehicles they need to get in and out. And it's not one municipality that'll solve it, which is why our members feel very strongly it's how do we bring your government, how do we bring the provincial government to the table to really start seizing on improving what happens in these large multi-regional zones.
Yeah, well, I think you did this cleverly and on purpose, Jan. You know, I think the answer is embedded in the question. I think actually, you know, we are not too bad in Canada at working together. And certainly when I sit at the G7 table with other finance ministers, they think we're pretty good at it. But I think we need to get better. And on issues like housing, on issues like transit, on issues like healthcare, on issues like education, what we really need is all levels of government to work together. And exactly as you pointed out, Jan, you know, with municipalities in an area like the GTA, we need different municipal governments to be working with each other. And the only, you know, further thing I would say to that is our government is an enthusiastic partner in that effort.
Okay. Back to climate economy. The question here, and I'm going to take some liberty with the question. The question is, how can the federal government help the provincial electric utilities connect east-west in addition to export to the U.S.? And then I'm going to have a follow-on related to the nuclear powerhouse that is Ontario. How do we transition that across the country as well? But first, the electric utilities. And this speaks to the grid challenge that you spoke to earlier.
Okay, provincial electrical utilities, you guys need to be standing on your feet and cheering and saying hip, hip, hooray for this budget. You know, every budget, I think our objective in putting this budget together was for it to be good for all Canadians. But one of the novel elements, which was obviously they're very much on purpose, is a huge focus on electricity and power generation and the grid. And it included, as you guys know very well, an absolutely novel element, which is that provincial utilities are eligible for this tax credit. Now, it doesn't happen in Canada. It doesn't happen in Canada that a federal tax credit is made applicable to a provincial entity. But we did it. So why? I would say 3 reasons. The first is, you know, clean power is one of the huge Canadian competitive advantages today. We have a grid already today that is more than 85% clean. And as the world looks to buy more clean products, that grid is just a huge, huge plus for us. So I'm a big believer, play to your strengths. This is our strength. We have to really lean in on it. Number 2, because we are playing to our strengths, we're going to need to double the amount of electricity we produce in Canada by 2050. Double. This is a huge, huge amount. And one thing that we need to be very careful about is we need to be sure that in this race to build the clean economy, we don't find that Canadian consumers are left out of the equation. Just take a look at the pain that Europe has suffered over the past 12 months with skyrocketing energy prices, and you'll understand a little bit the strain in a society when energy prices become unaffordable. So we need to double the amount of power we produce in order to have even more clean industries here in order to double down on that Canadian advantage. And we need to be sure that energy remains affordable for consumers. And that brings me to my third reason why, really, if you want to say what is the one, there are lots of great things in this budget, what is the one centerpiece? I would say it is electricity and the grid. And I think of this moment, you know, I talked to you guys about my insane optimism about Canada. It's not insane. It's a very rational optimism about Canada today. I think we're at this great, great moment of opportunity for our country. And I really do think it's comparable to that Laurier moment. But seizing the Laurier moment a century ago meant, or more than a century ago, meant you had to build the railways. And you needed to get the federal government involved to create that spine for the Canadian economy of the 20th century. Electricity, clean electricity, is the spine. It's the railway of the 21st century Canadian economy. And I believe that it's our responsibility as a government to be there, to invest, to ensure it gets built.
Thanks for that. No, fully agree. Closer to home, City of Toronto.
And nuclear is part of it, by the way.
Well, absolutely.
Bruce Power people, yeah.
And SNC-Lavalin, who are here as well. Yeah, all good, all good. City of Toronto, we're struggling. We're very much struggling to provide services to keep the region together. We look post-COVID, transit is running at less service, homelessness is at crisis proportions, housing affordability, safety concerns. A lot of big challenges are going to be facing the next mayor of Toronto. And in fact, a recent EY report indicated that the city was allocating more than $1 billion of residential property tax annually to cover services that were arguably provincial and federal government mandates. This morning, Deputy Mayor McKelvey issued a direct request for the federal government to address 2022-2023 COVID-related expenses to transit and homelessness. How do we reconcile this? How do we reconcile what our members believe is incompatibility with what the city is being asked to deliver with the revenue base it has to deliver it with? How do we reconcile this?
Well, thank you for the question. And again, I'm going to give you a three-part answer. First part of the answer is there is no political entity in Canada that has contributed more robustly to the City of Toronto, I would probably say in its history, than our government, than our federal government. Our federal government has been a huge supporter specifically of the City of Toronto. In the Safe Restart Agreement alone, the city got almost $1 billion. We have been a major investor in transit projects in the city, and following the Safe Restart Agreement, we contributed hundreds of millions more to keep the city going during COVID. So I would sort of respectfully submit to Torontonians, as your finance minister and as a Toronto MP, the federal government has been there for cities across Canada, and specifically for the City of Toronto, with more financial support than any other government, both right now and historically. We've been there on transit. We've been there on getting through COVID. We've been there on building city infrastructure. And we've been there on housing. And those are really significant investments, and they are investments that continue. With the entity formerly known as the gas tax, now known as the Community Building Fund, and now with the continuation of the Transit Fund. So there's a lot of money that went as significant support during COVID, and there is a lot, very significant ongoing support. So that is my answer number one. My answer number two is, I agree that we need to have some conversations in Canada about what is the funding base for our big cities. Because I think right now, the way our polity is structured doesn't match the needs of cities and their economic importance. So we need to have that ongoing conversation. A check from the federal government is not that ongoing conversation and is not that restructuring. I said I was going to give you 3 answers. I'm actually going to give you 4. So that's the first 2. Third one is, as Canada is currently structured, it is the provinces who bear responsibility for the municipalities and indeed have significant legal authorities over the municipalities, as municipalities have been experiencing recently in Ontario. And so if the City of Toronto feels that it has funding shortfalls that it cannot meet from its own tax base, I would urge people to ride your bike or walk or drive up the street and knock on the doors of Queen's Park. We're seeing a strong fiscal position in Ontario, and I think that's a good place to be seeking support if that's what the City of Toronto needs. And then my final answer, my 4th one. I'm actually glad to be here, and in addition to having people say, because I think you said like the clean energy investments, that's good. But also to have you say, wow, we wish you had spent more money on X, Y, or Z. And the reason I'm glad to be asked that question here is because it gives me a chance to emphasize for everyone in this room that fiscal responsibility matters too. And in putting together this budget, we had to meet some very, very pressing needs of the moment. We had to meet the needs of Canadians who are really struggling to pay the bills every month. That's the grocery rebate. We had to reinforce our healthcare system. And if anyone here thinks that that was not necessary, please put your hand up and your whole family will yell at you, because I don't know anyone in Canada who wasn't frustrated by the challenges our healthcare system was facing. And I also don't know anyone in Canada who doesn't really love and cherish our healthcare system. So we had to do that. And I 100% believe we needed to make the clean economy investments, and we had to do it right now, because otherwise, capital was not going to come to Canada. And it's not just that foreign capital was not going to come here. Canadian capital was going to go elsewhere. So that's what meeting the moment means. But I spoke also in my remarks about fiscal responsibility and how seriously I take that. And I really do. Canada has a AAA credit rating. I was very glad that following the tabling of the budget, one of the ratings agencies came out and said Canada's fiscal position intact. That, for me, was kind of the price of admission to putting the budget together. We had to maintain our fiscal sustainability. We had to have a deficit that continued to go down. We really, really need to do that. That determines our cost of borrowing. That includes the sustainability of everything we do. And, Anna and other city councillors who aren't here, I love the City of Toronto. I think it's fantastic. And I'm particularly concerned about the challenges, actually, which you didn't mention, Jan, but the challenges of the TTC. I rode the TTC with my family on Saturday, and if my kids are feeling tired after school and don't want to walk home, they ride the TTC, and they're anxious. And that is a real, real problem. So I am not in any way deaf or blind to the challenges the City of Toronto is facing. But I do want everyone to understand also that when I say I take fiscal responsibility seriously, I really, really mean it. And it means that with this budget, and it means with this budget there are going to be some people whose submissions were just not, whose submissions, however worthy, were just not able to fulfill.
Yeah. Look, fair enough, and I've had to ask some tough questions on behalf of our members and to share some of our insights. My reference to public safety was very much public safety TTC related because of those things. Look, I want to thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Not an easy time, and certainly I very much applaud your comment that what is very fair is the request that we need to think about the fiscal model for our large cities because of their economic importance, because of the concentration of Canadians that are based there. For us, that's an important way of spurring productivity for the country, economic growth, and much more affordability for Canadians. I'm going to stop here because I think this has been a very fair, very robust discussion, tough issues, really a lot of things we like about the budget, things we want to fix here closer to home, and I just want to thank you for all your time, all your energy, all your effort, and for biking once again to our podium. So please join me in a warm round of applause to our Deputy Prime Minister. Very, very good job. Thank you. You were very good. Well, and, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you very much, Jan, and thank you very much, everyone. I know everyone is really, really busy. Thank you for being here for this conversation. And, I saw a lot of people listening intently, nodding their heads. Thank you very much for the work you do. You said, Jan, that it's a tough budget, tough times. I agree, but I would also say we have some great, great assets and some tremendous advantages here in Canada. When I sit around that G7 finance ministers table, there is no one who wouldn't want to be sitting in my seat. And that's because of the work that everyone here does. And one of the things that I have felt just looking around this room, and I feel is a real advantage that Canada has, is Jan said she likes some things in the budget, she doesn't like other things in the budget. I bet that's true of every single person here. And I am pretty sure we don't all share exactly the same politics. But I'm also sure that we can sit together in a room and have a conversation in a big room like this and in smaller rooms and trust each other enough to work together to get things done for Toronto, for Ontario, for Canada. That's not true in a lot of places, and I really want to thank everyone who is here for that.
Yeah. Very, very strong. Okay. So thank you so much. Let me close things out with a shout out to say May 4th, Tiff Macklin will be here. So we'll be having a discussion with the Bank of Canada about interest rates. So Bankers Association, Anthony, we look forward to seeing you front row for that. Finally, thanks once again to our important sponsor today, our excellence partner for the event, the Canadian Bankers Association. Our principal sponsors, Scotiabank, the Globe and Mail, SNC-Lavalin, University of Toronto. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for coming here. I thought you'd end up at our new offices, so you're really good at listening to our emails and reading what's coming through. Have a great day, everyone, and Chrystia, keep doing what you're doing. You're just amazing. Thank you, everyone.